Next up we have Dr. Nan Rothschild. She's former director of the Museum Studies program and professor of anthropology at Barnard College and Columbia University. She received her PhD in anthropology and archaeology from NYU. Her wide-ranging interests have included prehistoric, historic, and ethnoarchaeology with field research in North America, in and around New York City, which we'll hear about tonight, as well as work on the Zuni Reservation and in the Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. Her interests include colonial encounters in North America, changes in gender role and status, urbanism, and the way in which food is used to express social and symbolic concepts. She has many publications, including Archaeology of American Cities, co-edited with Diana Wall, her collaborator on Seneca Village, which is really excellent. I recommend to everyone in the audience. And I'd like to say a big congratulations to Nan, as the newly launched New York City Archaeological Repository has recently been named in her honor.
Thank you, Jessica, and I'm really happy to represent the Seneca Village project here. As some of you know, following about 10 years of research, the Seneca Village project, directed by Cynthia Copeland, Diana Wall, and me, was able to excavate Seneca Village in 2011. The research involved documentary research, which was really focused on locating the structures in the park and the inhabitants of them. And here's the park today. Here's the Vielle map, which you all have already seen. But it has an inset showing Seneca Village. Okay. Oops, there's a little thing. Well, anyway, you can see it. And we also did soil borings to try to locate indigenous soils, and this involved these small cores excavated down several inches to several feet, and then analyzed for what were indigenous and what were imported soils. And this is a transect of a series of soil borings that were all in a row, and all of the green highlights indicate that there were 19th century material, sometimes coal, sometimes artifact. So this was a very promising particular transect, and gave us encouragement in our process. And then we also did ground penetrating radar. We did it twice actually, and radar, as you know, allows you to see below the ground because it provides a readout of what the radar wave encounters when it goes below the surface. And so here, the interpretation was that this was a house floor, and then here, the radar person, Larry Conyers from Denver, identified what he thought were several graves, and let me say that we did not excavate any graves. We would never intend to excavate any graves out of respect for the descendant community. But anyway, after doing this research, this is another version of the radar readout, which gives you horizontal slices of 25 centimeter intervals. After this, we were very encouraged about the possibility of recovering material from Seneca Village. We got funding from the National Science Foundation, National Geographic, several private foundations, and we had the permission and the really great assistance from the Conservancy and Parks Department. So our plan was to ground truth the radar, because the radar tells you that there's an anomaly, but you don't really know what the anomaly means until you excavate. And then we also hoped we would find meaningful deposits from the village. The excavations were really successful. We had a wonderful crew. They were untrained, but they learned very quickly. They didn't complain about backfilling every Friday afternoon and re-excavating the same dirt Monday morning. They didn't complain about the heat. And I think for some of them it was a really life-altering experience. This is a map showing you the areas in which we initially planned to excavate. And the ones that I want you to pay attention to are the one on the top, All Angels, and Transect 3. We recovered a lot of artifacts. And they are arranged on these slides. The first two are from All Angels from the Wilson House, and the second two slides show you material from Transect 3. These are ceramics, obviously. They're different wares. There's some red ware, there's some porcelain, there's some willow ware, there's some molded ironstone. And then these are other kinds of artifacts. The one on top in the middle. Sorry, I can't find this little red. There it is, okay. That is a curry comb, or the remains of a curry comb. This is some kind of slate pencil. This is a weight, maybe from fishing, a bone handle, obviously a buckle. This is the only coin that we found. It was a 3-cent coin from 1852. I can't see what's up there. Oh, okay, it's an eye, and then there below that are buttons. And then from Transect 3, we have this wonderful picture, which Jessica tells me that she helped to glue together. Some red transfer printed, a little tiny piece of gilded porcelain up here. This is slip-trailed earthenware, and we have some molded ironstone over here and a piece of shell-edged earthenware. And then these are also other artifacts from Transect 3 where we had a lot of glass. And at the top left, there is a part of a bottle that we now think may have held mineral water and may date to 1822. Obviously, you like it when your artifacts are diagnostic temporally. Here's a spoon, a pipe, a lot of glass, a bone handle up on the top with a rusted fork attached, a piece of hardware. Oh, and then we have, this is a very nice crock, I think. A piece of porcelain, and it was a little bit of a surprise to find porcelain in Seneca Village because the assumption was that these were relatively poor people and porcelain is a relatively expensive ware. And so, but there was quite a bit of porcelain. And then we have, this is our favorite artifact. This is a child's shoe. And it came from the Wilson House. And Amelia Cortez at the Met has been conserving it. So we have, in addition to finding these portable artifacts, we have found two features. They're sort of, in a sense, larger artifacts. But one of them came from All Angels, and it turned out to be a house. But when we started, the radar had suggested that there might be a midden in this area. This was in the most northern part that we did any work in, and we actually hadn't planned to start there, but because there was a concert in the park, the Black Eyed Peas, the Conservancy asked us if we would start in the northern part of the park, because that was furthest away from the concert. And so within about 10 or 15 centimeters of the ground surface, we started finding these stones, and the stones turned out to be parts of walls. You can see these same roots, and I noticed them in Richard's slides. I mean, the Conservancy asked us not to cut anything that was bigger than ½ an inch, and it made some of the digging very difficult. But in any case, we found stone walls, and we were able to identify several of the walls of the house and speculate as to where the other walls were. And so we ended up with this outline in brick of what the house would have looked like. It was occupied by William Godfrey Wilson, his wife Charlotte, and 8 children. It was 3 stories, and Diana and Cynthia and I were terribly thrilled. He was the sexton of All Angels Church, and so his house was right behind the church. We haven't found the church, but his house contained a great deal, a very rich deposit of material culture. The other important feature that we found. And again, the radar had suggested that this might be a house floor. What it was a glacial boulder, glacially deposited boulder. So we know that the radar is very good at picking up stone. But it turned out that right at the top of the boulder, well, I hope you can see this line of dark at the top of the boulder. That was a buried ground surface. And what's important about the ground surface is that it was the surface on which people in Seneca Village walked. So they walked there, they dropped things, they lost things. It also, in theory, contained botanical materials that represented what plants were in the area. And so it was a very important find. And this slide shows you the excavation units in blue, and it's overlaid on the Sage map of 1856, and the houses are shown in black. So you can see that the excavations that we did were mostly in the backyards of these houses. Now, what these big features did was that they gave us larger samples of material and they gave us contexts. So we had material that could be associated with a particular house or a group of houses. And we know from the documents that the Seneca villagers were very focused on, education was a priority for them and their children. And they also were concerned with the creation of a moral community. Many of them had a great interest in abolition. And we know that some of their life cycle events, like marriages and baptisms, were done in front of interracial witnesses. We think that it could have been a pleasant community, remote from the racial hostility in the southern part of the city, and somewhat autonomous. We think it was a middle-class African-American community. And people historians did not really talk about middle-class African-American communities until Leslie Harris started writing about them 10 or 15 years ago. And we think that there should be artifactual signatures of this kind of community. Since the excavation, we have been doing the very tedious work of identifying the artifacts and tabulating everything and writing the report. It's just about done. And we are also, Diana and Cynthia and I are planning to write something for the public, either a book or a pamphlet. But because the goal of this excavation was not really the excavation, it was bringing Seneca Village to light and making it known in the world at large, and particularly in New York City. We want today's school kids to be aware of Seneca Village and communities like it. They changed the 19th century landscape and the trajectory of African American history in places like New York and Boston and Washington. Now, to approach the subject I was asked to talk about, the reversibility and visibility of the site. Let me say, first of all, that excavation is a destructive process. There's no way that we can take all the soil and the artifacts and put them back in the ground and reconstruct the site. So reversibility is just not possible. However, that fact and the issue that the site is buried doesn't mean that we don't have the information, so that it doesn't really matter that it's not reversible. We have the information about the community from the artifacts and from their relationships. And there may be more to be gained in the future, given what Richard and his team have found recently. What I would like to make an argument for, however, is that the site as it represents the existence of this community, have more visibility. Some sort of present-day representation of its existence. I don't know how that can be done. It's really up to the descendant community and the Conservancy to work that out, whether we're talking audio tours or photographs or a garden or something. I don't have ideas about how it should be done. Lately, some of us have been using GIS, and Zoe Crossland and I are teaching a course at Columbia this semester. And GIS is a computer program that allows the superposition of spatial layers in the same locale, representing different time periods or different data. And this fits well for archaeologists with the notions of stratigraphy. But thinking about, as I've been doing this semester, thinking about layers of spatially arrayed data changes one's perception, I find. And I've come to see the park as a palimpsest, different portions of it resonating at different times, before the park, early in the park, and then in different iterations of the park as it has evolved and changed. Planned by different people for different purposes and used sometimes for entirely other purposes and by other groups of people. And I think it would be amazing if some of that temporal and spatial richness and diversity could be present, could be reflected in the modern park. Now I know, yesterday was Halloween, I'm talking about ghostly presences, but I think, I'm not sure how to do this. That's the hard part. But I think it begins with the acceptance of the park. And I think what we've heard tonight really reinforces that idea. It begins with the acceptance of the park as a place of many parts, evocative of varying periods of time, used by different segments of the city's population. We should try to promote the visibility of these different groups and structures. I love Central Park. It's an amazing place. I think it could be enhanced by the awareness of these other lives. Thank you.